Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Let me first welcome you on behalf of HP to the next installment in our webinar series. I'm really glad that you joined us today. Please allow me to quickly introduce myself. As the slide on the screen will show you, my name is Rick Bravo, and I'm part of the Global Strategy Business Development Team for the page-wide industrial business inside HP. And I've been with HP for about 7 years now and had a number of different roles. And one of the roles that I currently have includes publishing segment management. I have been fascinated by the developments, as I'm sure many of you are, with publishing and COVID over the past year. And certainly this is an interesting time to be in the publishing industry. I think a lot of you may be asking the question, why HP? Why HP? Why is HP involved in publishing? And so let's start by answering that, and why the Publishing 2020 vision. First, let me reinforce that HP is an entrepreneurial company, and it has an entrepreneurial spirit at its core. And our company vision is to create technology that makes life better for everyone, everywhere, every person, every organization, and every community around the globe. This is what motivates us. It inspires us to do what we do and to make what we make. And our motto is to invent and reinvent. And so true to the original inspiration that our founders had for our organization, we think this webinar series is very much in line with the company's mission, which is to reinvent, which is to adopt a forward-thinking philosophy. So we've already completed now about 6 webinars on a number of different topics that have allowed us to explore wide-ranging topics and dynamics that are really driving change and transforming the publishing industry. It is undoubtedly that the impact of the past year and COVID, the global pandemic, continues to persist. It already has persisted for over a year and will continue to persist for the foreseeable future. And so we are bringing together some of the most informed voices to look at what the trends and the future holds. And so the obvious goal driving this series is to explore positive change in the months to come. So I'm trying to get to the next slide here. There we go. So how is HP participating within the publishing industry today? We've been a leader in digital print for the past 30 years, and for over, you can see the 12 most recent, we are the leader in industrial printing. Since 2008, we've printed over 250 billion A4 book pages. We're the #1 player in inkjet publishing, and we do that through our network of over 50 print service providers, creating books currently in over 18 countries around the world. And we expect those numbers to continue to increase. In short, we are very active in the industry with our digital print technology. And we believe currently that we're printing roughly half the books that are done print on demand. But moving beyond that and starting to look beyond the hardware, our focus includes delivering solutions that create new business opportunities and for our customers. And so with that, just 2 years ago, we brought to market at the London Book Fair HP Piazza, which essentially bridges the world of book publishing and digital printing to offer a greener publishing supply chain. Piazza is a cloud-based system that can be integrated into a publisher's existing systems. It allows publishers to print and deliver their content to order, which means no more overstock, no more warehousing or reduced warehousing, less complicated logistics, and just more efficiency. And so this tightly integrates with our digital printing HP site flow workflow. And together we're building and creating a global network of print partners that can produce on-demand and in-market readily available books almost around the world. So this is just a high-level involvement, overview of our involvement in the industry, and we are very excited to be involved in the series as it continues. Before I hand it over to our moderator, I wanted just to share a couple of housekeeping notes. First, we'll be running for about the next 55 minutes, until the top of the hour. And at that time, we'll include time for questions, which we will have at the end. The questions will be moderated by the team. So if you do have questions, please use the chat function at the bottom of your screen. Please indicate if there's a specific panelist you prefer to answer. Feel free to load these questions as we go, as they come to top of mind. And on that note, I would like now to introduce you to our moderator for today, Ed Nowatka. Ed is the bookseller and international editor of Publishers Weekly and U.S. coordinator of Publishers Weekly Espanol, which launched this August. Oh, very good. Previously, he edited Publishing Perspectives, which he also founded. Ed is widely published at home and abroad. Some of his recent work covered the future of publishing and the role of China in U.S. publishing for the Los Angeles Times, and the role of literature in U.S. diplomatic relations for the Houston Chronicle. A long-serving faculty member of the Yale Publishing course at the Yale University School of Management, he has lectured on many publishing events from Sao Paulo to Sharjah to Seoul and many places in between. And so with that, please allow me to welcome Ed.
Thanks so much, Rick. I really appreciate it. It's very generous. So we're going to take the next 55 minutes and look at some of the global trends and issues affecting export. And rather than have me speak on behalf of our panelists, I'm going to give each of them an opportunity to just introduce themselves briefly before we jump into the conversation. I'm going to have everybody start their videos and unmute themselves. And I just, again, want to encourage everybody out there in the audience to feel free to ask questions. We'll be able to read those in the chat. And this is meant to be practical. We're here for you, so don't be shy. And we can really hopefully engage you and offer you some practical takeaways for your time. So thanks for joining us all. I'm going to just start with my right, and let's, why don't we have Rick, or not Rick, why don't we have Rob? Why don't you start introducing yourself? We can, and then we'll just take it from there.
Okay, thanks, Ed. So my name is Rob Thompson. I am currently the International Sales Director for Collins Learning, which is the Education and Reference Division of HarperCollins, based out of London. I have been in publishing and bookselling really for about 25 years. I think this was my 25th year, and it was an odd year to celebrate. In that time, I've been a bookseller first, and then a publisher across 2 or 3 publishing houses, but always in export. So my background is export and educational export in particular, with sort of a long history of traveling around the world, visiting schools all over the world. So that's me.
Fantastic. Devin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Devin Luna. I'm currently Vice President, International Sales and Marketing at Macmillan Trade Publishers. I am also celebrating an anniversary this year. It's my 20th year in publishing, and most of that time has been in international markets. I started with working with our UK colleagues in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, and have since expanded my role and joined Macmillan in 2014, and I've been here ever since. Personally, I'm a wife, mother, 2 baby boys, and I'm really happy to be here talking with you all.
Fantastic. And Denis, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Ed. Hello, everyone. I'm Denis Berriat. My actual function is head of Hachette Livre International, which is the subsidiary of the Hachette Livre Publishing Group, designed to export sales throughout the world, main countries, of course. And my background is mainly in print, but for press print before joining book print, like in magazine publishing and newspapers publishing. And then I switched 6 years ago to books and export books.
Wonderful. And finally, Joaquín, could you please introduce yourself?
Hello. Hello, everybody. My name is Joaquín Alvarez de Toledo. I am working in Grupo Planeta in Barcelona, in Spain. I've been in the group since 1994, so I've been 25 years in the group. In my first 10 years, I was in charge of all operations between Spain and Latin America. We have more than 88 subsidiaries in Latin America, and all the operations, all the expos between Spain and Latin America that in these first years was really huge. I was in charge. I was the responsible of all the operations department. Since 2000, I've been in the books division, working for different imprints, leading mainly non-fiction imprints in the Spanish market. Then I was also the CEO of the book club in Spain, Círculo de Lectores. It was a joint venture with Bertelsmann in Spain during 4 years. And I'm currently, I am the CEO for the non-fiction imprints in the Planeta group.
Excellent. So collectively, I think between the 5 of us, we have more than 115 years of experience. So hopefully we can share some good information today. Let's, I guess we'll start again with Rob and carry on. But how do we want to characterize, and if we can keep it brief, what has been your biggest challenge this year? And what have you gone, what are you taking pains to try to explain to your colleagues and the other executives about the challenges you're facing in the export markets right now? And obviously, if you can give us some sense of quantifying what the value of that is to your company, that would also be welcome if you're comfortable sharing some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to give some background for us in Collins, export has been for the last 2 or 3 years up to this year, has been around about 38%, 40% of our overall sales. So it's a fairly substantial portion of the company. That's grown. When I joined, I came to Collins about 10 years ago, and at that point it was probably less than 20%. So export has become, over 10 years, significantly more important to us, and is actually probably on par with the home UK market for us at the moment. So the big challenge for us this year, if you look at the last 12 months, is that 38% has become 30%. So we've dropped as a significant, as a part of the business. And for us in particular, in the sector that I'm in education, the big challenge, well, the outward challenge has been trying to maintain contact with institutions which have been ostensibly closed for much of the last 6 months, trying to keep a picture for my colleagues as to what's happening in 100 different countries around the world, because that's part of our role with, sort of on a senior management team, is to educate your colleagues about what's happening in everywhere from Chile to China and everywhere in the middle. So trying to keep up to date. But actually for me, the biggest challenge of the past 6 months has been trying to keep a sales force and my colleagues sort of active and enthused and keep the morale up when you've got a team of people who are used to and take for granted either jumping on a plane or going to meetings or going to London or going to the Frankfurt Book Fair, and taking all that away from them and yet saying you still need to do your job. That's been my biggest challenge for sure.
Devin, would you concur that working with your team to reinvent communication and motivating them and your customers and your clients has been a challenge for you? And
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I'm just shaking my head. Everything Rob is saying is absolutely true. But it has been amazing to see how quickly the team has, come together and gone virtual. Our entire company is basically virtual at this point, and we are thriving and we're doing well. And interesting to see that we've had these tools for a number of years, and it's not until this pandemic it's really made us depend on them. And thank goodness we have the technology available at this point. And I think that it's changing the way that we will work going forward in a positive way. I'm an eternal optimist, so I every challenge has an opportunity.
Can you quantify for us what
Yes.
what the contribution is
Yes.
for export to Macmillan?
Right. So out of the U.S. on the trade side of the business, the U.S. market is vast, the largest market in the world. So international is about 4 to 5% of the business relative to the domestic size. So still significant. And I like to say that our margins are healthy. So we are a very, it's a good part of the business to be growing in the way that we are.
Are there major countries, unlike Collins, which is talking about 100 and has this sort of vast footprint with a much larger percentage? Are there key countries for you? And do you include Canada as an export market, for example, which is very adjacent to the U.S.?
Right. So, certain publishers may consider Canada as an export market, but at Macmillan, we treat it as a home market. So currently, I do not look after Canada. So US and Canada would be together, and international would be everything outside of that. Mm-hmm. But our major markets, I mean, we service over 100 different countries around the world with English language books, whether it's physical and digital formats, and key markets for us, of course, Asia and Europe.
Asia and Europe, gotcha. Yeah. Speaking of Europe, Denis, could you tell us a little bit about, what has been your challenge so far, and tell us a little bit about the key markets and quantify for us for Hachette. And you might need to unmute yourself first. Oh, it might take a second. Oh, you might need to do that again. But I can come back to you, Denis. Joaquín.
Okay, I can come back now. Sorry.
There we go.
Yeah, you hear me? Yeah.
We hear you.
Sorry. To the challenges are basically the same ones that I've heard before with Rob. The schools were closed, and textbooks are about 60% of our revenues. Also, the bookshops were closed in parts in regions of like overseas France. All bookshops were closed between March and May this year in France, but also in the French department overseas, like the French West Indies and so forth. So basically all of our clients were closed. And then the other challenge was to adapt our promotional tools to the fact that we could not travel and go to the different countries. So I very much agree with Devin that we were very happy to have the technology to do that, but we had to walk and learn at the same time, because we didn't have really a good experience of that, of this new use of distance promotional tools.
Fair enough.
The challenges we had.
Learning how to exploit those tools, and obviously to just having the tools not enough, but knowing how to use it effectively is one of the key changes.
And one of the challenges we also have is we work very much with emerging countries in Africa, especially French-speaking countries below the Sahara Desert. Yes. And they do not necessarily have all the equivalent tools to what we were used to work with. So and also culturally, it's important to go there and talk to people face to face. And this is something that I'm happy if we can come back next year and again be able to meet our clients face to face.
Yes. Joaquín, can you tell us a little bit about Planeta's point of view as far as export is concerned. Obviously, you are the dominant Spanish language publisher on the globe. Spanish is the third most spoken language on the planet after English and Chinese. So this has obviously had a significant impact, the inability to travel and the challenges to communicate face to face. So can you tell us a little bit about your year?
Okay, I will give you an overview of how we organize our exports. We have three main areas. The key area for us, of course, is the Latin American countries, okay? Most of them, we have our subsidiary, okay? So we normally will export some kind of books, not all. Those books that they can print on their own, we send the file and they then print the books. But for those that are small print runs, we used to export lots of books every year. Of course, this year, all Latin America is also involved in the pandemic with a very high rates of closing business, etc. The other part is Europe, but is not significant for us because it's mainly for those bookstores specialized in the Spanish-speaking books, okay? And the rest of the world is also very affected. We organize our export through a company that owns all the main publishers in Spain, and they are very, very affected. But for us, the key market is Latin America, and for us, the challenge right now is that the Spanish book market is recovering quite fast. So probably at the end of this year, the market will be 5 to 10% lower than last year. That is, there are really good news. But in Latin America, this percentage is they are still very high. They will close the year with a 50% of less sales. The market are very, very close. The digital sales, the e-commerce in Latin America is also very stopped. So we are really facing great losses in Latin America because of the exports.
Well, let's address the question of because the exports. When people thinking of exports, they're often thinking about supply chain challenges, right? Putting books into containers, getting them across the ocean. And just this past year, we saw, let's take one really obvious example, which was just this past week, the delivery of the biggest English language book of the year, which was the first edition of Barack Obama's memoir. I feel we can talk about this because there's nobody from Penguin Random House on this panel. One of the issues was they had to have 1.5 million copies of the book printed in Germany. They were shipped to the US. They made it in time, unfortunately, because the way book deliveries are done in Germany, the way the protocols are, a lot of those books arrived in boxes that were not packed correctly. Okay, so you had 6 boxes to a container. In Germany, you tend to have overnight shipping. You also have a different protocol for deliveries. You know, there's different standards, shall we say. So the German printers weren't they weren't familiar with the American market. A lot of those books arrived damaged. Okay, this is a big issue. This is the single biggest release of the year. Some booksellers are reporting as many as a third of their books are showing up damaged. That's just one of the issues that we're seeing. Can we talk a little bit about supply chain and what this year has taught us about both the challenges of globalization and our dependency on freight? I mean, the cost of that is not going down. Our dependency in many cases on printing in Asia when those factories were shut down for a period of time, and also the opportunities of digital. And I know that this is a lot to take in, but I just want to give everybody some latitude to talk about these. Does anybody want to jump in with some thoughts on that?
I can start here, I think.
Please do.
I have some experience printing in Germany. Macmillan, a couple years ago, published Michael Wolff's Fire and Fury. And that was a huge success. So we printed in Germany to fulfill the demand. And that was a success for us. We also have published after that a few other key titles locally in Europe, and that has helped supply chain enormously. But as I'm dealing with the international markets, I didn't bring them back into the US. So we didn't have all the damages that PRH may be seeing. But locally printing has become very important for us to fulfill market demand, because the timing of freight from the US, even before the pandemic, was a strain. And the pandemic has only made the timing and the cost of freight much, much larger. So we are looking at all options, and this, it could open up new ways of working in the future.
Has anybody had some, please?
Sorry, I mean, I think that what's interesting, we have a slightly different experience with local printing, particularly. Part of our business, and quite a substantial part of our business, is actually mapping and atlases. And there are various parts of the world that for a long time have been fairly restrictive in where we can print those maps and atlases. I mean, that led us print-wise to diversify and move our printing to a lot of different locations a few years ago. But what we are increasingly finding is that we seem to play a game of chase the rabbit around, in that we'll get a printer, we'll develop a relationship, and then the paper prices will go up or the shipping will be difficult. And I think that for us, what's happened, for Collins particularly, what's happened is over the last year, most of our printing has actually become closer to home than further away. So we now print a significantly bigger amount in the UK than we do in Europe, and a significant amount more in Europe than we do in the Far East. And had you asked me that question 3 years ago, I would have reversed that. We printed virtually nothing in the UK at that point in time.
It's surprising, and that's cost effective for you to print in the UK.
Because of the cost of freight, particularly at the moment, it is significantly better for us to print in the UK than even in Europe.
Joaquín, you were nodding your head, so I'm gonna ask you to comment.
Well, just to share with you our experience. In Spain, we mainly produce all our books locally in Spain. We are now working in a very, very short terms with bookstores, so we print or reprint very fast, and we can manage the supply chain in a very flexible manner. Where we have challenges in Latin America, because Latin America printing industry is not quite developed as in Europe. Okay, so we have really great problems in Latin America. For example, when we have a great launch, that we have to print in one country, for example, in Colombia, in order to then export to the rest of the countries. For us in Latin America, I think there is a big necessity of develop the industry in order to improve our supply chains. We need it really to improve our supply chain.
The history of printing in Colombia is quite fascinating, how it was developed. It has some very interesting ties to the dark side of the past of the country. Would you say that because of this, that a company like HP has an opportunity to aggressively move into these markets where they have smaller machines that take a little bit less of a footprint and a little bit less of an investment? This is no plug for them, but they are obviously our hosts, so I'm going to use them as an example. Do you think that they have an opportunity further in Latin America, Joaquín?
For sure. I mean,
okay.
For example, Brazil, that is a country middle of Latin America. Brazil has a very developed industry, printing industry, in comparison with the rest of the countries. So I think that Mexico has has to develop the industry. Argentina, I don't know if you have heard that they are, since 2-3 years ago, they are establishing some protective rules for local printing industry. We were 2 years with all the country closed for imports of books because they are trying to develop the local industry. It's a protectionist measure. Right now they are also wondering if the Spanish ink is sustainable enough. I mean, they are trying to protect the local industry, but they are not getting I understand the industry coming to these countries because other questions about the economy of the country and other things.
So there's there are institutional challenges within the countries themselves often that are preventing this investment, which is much needed, obviously. Denis, how are you finding the export markets for the French language? Obviously, Quebec, I believe, is the major one for Hachette outside of France, and maybe you could talk a little bit about, expand a little bit about the opportunity for the African markets, because we're seeing a lot of movement of people trying to invest in the francophone markets in Northwest and West Africa. Perhaps you can talk about that, and of course the home market in France for printing.
Yeah.
Oh.
But Quebec has its own distribution branch, which I am not responsible for. Okay. And the main market outside France is Belgium rather than Quebec for our books.
Forgive me.
And also Switzerland is quite important. But and then something that most people don't know, the largest country for population, for French-speaking population, is not France. It's Democratic Republic of Congo, and its capital Kinshasa. And this country we work with. So what I gather from your question and the other participants' answers is where do we go with our printing facilities? We at Hachette do not have any printing facilities. We always order and prints outside the company. And we mostly use facilities based in Europe. Also sometimes Lebanon, China and India, but it's mostly Spain and Italy for the quality and price of the books. We have to have very high quality books for the textbooks, also for the color reproduction, and that's what we use. As I said before, we work for many countries, the biggest ones being in emerging Africa, which does not have, unfortunately, very much facility. Up to our standards. So there's room for improvement there. But this is where we stand right now. We basically for the printing, we export from Europe to all the countries that we work with commercially.
Well, how has the price of freight then impacted your business in the last say 12 months? Because we've seen the cost is not going down, obviously.
No, it's not. For the sea freight, it didn't change that much. We maintained all our capacities, and we didn't have any major problem, be it for the duration. This is basically for trade books, what we call trade books, like literature, comics, and so forth. So the impact is not very high for us. And we don't have enough volume to justify having a printing facility partner in the different countries where we work just for these kind of books. For the textbooks, it's something else. We could use partners in the different countries we work with. The only problem is that these sales are very seasonal. Basically, I don't know if my colleagues would agree with me, but for the textbooks, we basically print in January, February, and send the books. Then once they've been printed, you've got to, if you want your printing facility to be profitable, you've got to have other volumes to print. and the textbooks is so seasonal that it's sometimes difficult to do. But I'd be very happy to hear all the other panelists about that.
The seasonality, sure, you can't leave your print facility idle if you hope to have it be profitable. Rob, would you do you have some thoughts on that, on the seasonality of this, particularly the textbook business?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, we run into exactly the same issues. It can be, hasn't been for a couple of years, but it can be as much as half of our year's revenue can come in 1 month. So we will be shipping out 50% of the books that we'll ship over a year in 1 month. So if we're printing somewhere, we're the worst possible customer for any printers, because we will want thousands of books printed very quickly for 1 month and then not speak to them again for 10 months. So it is a bit of a problem. We've tried to negate that a little bit strategically by expanding the markets. For us, we've done a bit more and are growing in areas in the Southern Hemisphere which have a different school season. So if we can do more in Latin America, which we've been trying to do for a few years quite successfully, but also in parts of Southeast Asia, their school year starts at a different time. So it evens out that seasonality. But absolutely, we would normally see a huge peak in June, shipping out for export markets to get books for September. So that's very common, and that was a huge problem for us with the freight this year, because everyone wanted to shift from air to sea because air became ludicrously expensive. And one of our key markets, for instance, is within the Middle East, and many of our Middle Eastern customers didn't have a sea freight shipper because they're so used to cheap air freight.
Right. Can we let's take a slightly different topic and talk about with export markets. Are you seeing any demand when we want to look at a little bit about issues of innovation? I'm curious what innovation looks like to you for export markets, and if there are opportunities for growth. Companies like HP have been, for the past decade, 15 years, been promoting customization, personalization, largely through POD solutions. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts as to what that innovation might look like. And then we have a couple audience questions we'll go to after this. Does anybody want to try that one?
I'm quite happy to pick up first and make a point. I'm happy to do so, particularly on the educational side. Speaking on that side of the business, particularly innovation over the last 5-6 years for us is localization. It's becoming when I started 20 years ago, pretty much everyone in the world would have the same textbook that we use in schools that were teaching in English. Now we will have 4 or 5 different versions depending on market, and the innovation is an increasing localization of that content, and the constant demand for something specific for market, which has gone from sort of global to regional to country specific. We find that increasingly, even with private schools, want a country-specific solution.
Does that allow you to increase margin on the books?
No. It allows us to decrease margin generally. It makes it quite difficult to convince some of my finance colleagues. But what it does is it enables you to be a part of that market. It gives you a long-term part in that market. So over years, it enables us to continue getting revenue, but it has seen a massive squeeze on margins.
Only more expensive. Does anybody else have a similar experience with customization or personalization?
Yes, I do in a way. Sorry, Devin, you want to?
Oh, no. Go ahead.
Devin?
It might take a second, but go ahead. Please, you start.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll give him a second.
Give it a second.
Have to localize and include the national educational policies to answer their needs as best as we can. And that includes or implies that we design contents which we produce for them, we customize them, and pupils to educate there, but we have to have large printing facilities, which we do not find in the countries we work with in Africa. So we still have to print them in Europe and then export them with the freight. But that's something that probably is going to change in the, I would say, long-term years, but not yet.
So it's a goal, ultimately, that we think.
For that. And also we need to publish with a very high binding quality, because these countries are hot, humid, and the books are supposed to last for 6 years. So they have to, as I know, we haven't found a way to do that in POD.
Devin.
For us on the US side of things in export, localization looks like different formats. It's book plus possibly an audio or visual component to it, an added value form. And a lot of our customers are developing these, and it's been amazing to see and be a part of. Also on the marketing side of things, video bloggers, loggers, and the way we market books is changing, and it's also becoming a bit more localized in a sense. And that also is helping us to sell a lot of books in export.
Do you, will you run a single global marketing campaign for a given title at Macmillan, or do you specialize per market, depending on the schedule?
We definitely specialize per market. Certain markets need certain things, but we also, it can be multi-layered, because you can also have an overarching marketing plan. And a lot of our marketing, is developed for the home market, and then we essentially export that marketing around the world, and then localize depending on the different territory.
That's I mean, you bring up a really important point that we haven't really gotten to yet, is that digital is also an emerging field of exports, if not, it's, I don't know, I think we would use the word digital as emerging anymore. Have you any thoughts on that? And I'd like to ask Joaquín that as well. But is digital it must be a big growth opportunity, particularly facing the challenges that we've outlined in the previous 40 minutes or so.
Exactly. So, ebooks are not new, audiobooks are not new, but with, and before this, we were probably not seeing the growth anymore in these channels. They probably had flatlined to a certain extent. And with the pandemic, we are now seeing another boom and interest in these formats. It's helping us because during these times where we're facing challenges with freight and getting our books into a certain market, we are happy to service our authors by being able to have our books in the market and readily available at on sale date in the digital format.
And Joaquín, how is this shift to digital this year for many consumers impacted the work you're doing?
Well, here in Spain, of course, we have an important growth for digital, not only ebooks, but also audiobooks, okay? But for us, the main focus is in developing the e-commerce platform for selling physical books. We think that we must push on this direction, mainly in Latin America. That is, as I mentioned before, one of the fields that we think we can innovate. Okay, there are a lot of demand of our books in Latin America that they are not printed. We don't have sales enough to print runs there, and for us we have in Spain a very developed e-commerce with our own book chain that is Casa del Libro. And for us, one of the challenges for this will be to develop the e-commerce platform in Latin America. For the digital, we are also in. We have our own platform for digital ebooks in a subscription model in Spain called Nubico, that is doing quite well. That we have growth a lot. We are the leaders of the market with a joint venture with the Telefónica, that is the main company in Spain. And what we are learning a lot is from our consumer insights and what the way they are reading, the way they are looking for books, and it will help a lot also for the traditional business.
Yes. It's interesting. We just looking at some of the statistics about exports, and I'm going to talk in the U.S. context, because the U.S., as we noted, is still the biggest book market. If we look at digital, China actually accounts for 24% of all the digital traffic around the world, and the U.S. is a distant second at about half that, about 12%. And it leads me into that question: Are any of you all, for many years, one of the goals of many companies as far as growth was to grow their businesses in China and then in a more broad term in Asia. And I'm curious if any of y'all could reflect on that, because we're all Europeans and North Americans here, and we don't have anyone from Asia. I'm curious if anybody has some thoughts on working with the Asian markets and what the opportunities might be. You have literally half the world's population living within a couple-hour flight of Hong Kong. And so I'm curious if we could talk about that briefly. Anyone have direct experience or some thoughts on that market? Because it poses a lot of different challenges, from everything from the demands of the Chinese government to language concerns to to sales. The buying activities are different. Everything is digital for the most part.
I can speak to it.
Absolutely.
I can start the conversation, but China specifically has become our biggest economy in Asia, and it is a very important market for English language books.
Yep.
The physical format is still the best-selling format for us in export, although we are seeing an increase in digital ebooks. But yeah, there are challenges because we need to work with state-owned importers, and there are barriers to that. But there's also a lot happening there, and there's a lot of, it's the maturing of a market that is learning what exactly they can sell, and a lot is sold online. A lot of our business is done through online sales, and some of the major online retailers there. We just had 11/11 and gearing up for the December
Singles Day, I believe it's called.
Yes, which is now celebrated around the world. I mean, we're seeing the impact of China's growth everywhere, and it's, I believe, benefiting us all.
Did you see a pop in sales on 11/11?
So a lot of our customers buy up way in advance, so we can't, we don't have the data yet to track the actual day of events, but we assume that we did very nicely on that day. But all year, I mean, China is up drastically for us this year, and it's amazing to see in a year of COVID and how well they have handled the pandemic and gotten back to business and living with the virus, where their economy has been able to still thrive.
So by being in that market and being very present, it's been a boost to the business at home, obviously, that you've been able to bring numbers in that were respectable.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've also hired a sales manager based in Beijing, so we are also investing in the market.
Fantastic. Anybody else have some experience in China or in Asia overall? Rob?
I'm quite happy to jump in. Yeah, absolutely. We have, China is a very, very significant market for us. We have, within my sales team, I've got 3 based in Beijing, which we've built up over a few years. China is a really interesting market for us in terms of what we publish and what goes into the market. probably the biggest consumer market. Most of our books don't end up in schools, they end up with consumers. About 99% of them sold online, as Devin makes reference to. It's pretty much the single biggest access to the consumer market in China. We do a lot of business there. It can be very problematic for everything that's been mentioned, importers, and all the rest of it. But one of the things I wanted to come back to actually within regard to China is the comment about the digital market, because it is an increasingly digital savvy market, and digital sales are very important there. But the way to market has many, many more barriers than in any other digital market that we would have. So, for instance, we have quite a large reading scheme that is digitized and sold as ebooks in China, all done through a party. You cannot host those in your normal ebook platforms that you would host outside of China. It has to be hosted inside China or it won't work. There are lots of complexities to that, but we do very well with those partners and then selling print product directly as well. China is a very significant market, as is Malaysia to us, which is probably the fastest growing market.
Malaysia being a fast growing market.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the marketing in China is quite fascinating. The digital marketing, you have a lot of influencers, but it's done slightly differently. You know, there will be an influencer, could be even one within somebody's village or within a very micro market, but they can move a lot of units of books if people get behind it.
A lot of QR codes, I have to say.
Is that right? Yeah.
QR codes are everywhere.
QR codes and WeChat conversations.
Yes. Yes.
We have a lot. I think we all have a lot to learn. I think we're going to be learning a lot, and the lead is going to happen from there. We do have we have less than 10 minutes more, but we're going to wait for some questions from the audience. But I would hope. But let me ask everybody, if you could, Denis, maybe you could reflect on or suggest, how are the next 3 to 6 months looking for you? If you want to put on your crystal ball wizard hat and tell us a little bit about what the future is looking like. I mean, how dependent are we going to be on hoping things get back to quote unquote normal? Well, perhaps we can come back. Joaquín, do you want to jump in and maybe address that question, and then we'll come back to Denis.
Okay, what we expect in the next 3 to 6 months?
Exactly. And yeah.
Probably is a very short time, because 3 months means after Christmas campaign. But what we see is that Latin America will evolve with different speeds, with different velocities. Within Argentina could grow in the first semester of the year. We have some doubts of Mexico. We think also Spain will recover 2019 levels of sales, so we'll probably expect to grow 5% next year. And it depends on the different countries. These different speeds will be a challenge for us to cover in all the continent. Okay.
Excellent. Rick, would you like to turn your camera back on? I believe you have a question for us.
Thanks for the invitation back. So my question to the broader audience is, I've heard a few comments throughout the session today. Thank you first, by the way, on all of the insights. How does technology come into play when looking at the concerns about piracy, especially of content, when choosing a printer around the world? I guess the question really is around, is it a factor in when you consider where you're going to print? And that's broadly for anyone that wants to jump in.
Well, I think piracy is not only for printing books. Piracy is something also for digital. So we think that it's much more a question of education and laws than trying to develop technology that at the end what we want is to have a system that our books, our contents was always available in any format. So.
Joaquín brings up a good point too, because it makes me think of piracy happening when best-selling books aren't available. And so to make your book widely available and to make sure your best-selling products are in markets, piracy would be less important, less in demand.
I agree. And I think that's a really good point, Devin, that the piracy is fueled when books aren't available. Absolutely. In answer to Rick's question, and from my experience, absolutely yes. When considering where we're going to print, piracy is a very significant factor because it's quite prevalent in some of our sectors, and we do always consider that. But again, I also agree with Joaquín that making sure that the laws are tight and that the books are available and that people know what the rules of copyright are is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Denis, do you find the same thing with piracy? One of the most extraordinary things I ever saw was in India. I saw a table of remaindered books that were pirated books that had been remaindered.
Yes, there were a lot, and the key factor is the availability on the local markets for the books. As Rob said, I totally agree. If you don't have the books, and we've seen that again in Algeria this year, we had enormous difficulties for importing books because the government wouldn't allow the books to enter the country, for not just for us, but for all textbooks publishers from France. And they released the visas, which were necessary, very late. And in the meantime, the counterfeit books, and there was nothing we could do against that. But this kind of void calls for piracy. So we've got to be there locally. It's absolutely necessary.
So having the opportunity to be there either physically or through your physical books is a key to servicing these markets and mitigating that risk of piracy and potentially losing that revenue.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, well, it looks like we have just one or two more moments left, and maybe we'll include, Rick, obviously we want to include you and we'll give you the last word and have you include this as well. But I'd like each of you, just in summary, to offer, if you have a final thought as far as our audience is concerned about looking ahead on growing export markets, whether they're, I imagined there's not as many people who are working at scale like you are. So let's maybe address the smaller players. What would you advise them as far as looking to expand their own footprint globally and trying to grow their export market? And each of you will, take 30 seconds, 45 seconds or so to answer, and then we'll end with Rick. Maybe we'll start with Rob. You're there in the middle of my screen.
Okay, it's always the best way to pick someone in the middle of the screen.
Absolutely.
I find myself doing it all the time. My advice, I think, sort of the challenges we talk about, and actually listening to a webinar like this and listening to a discussion like this is about the challenges of export, which is right because it's a challenging time. But the benefits of exporting to a company are huge, and the diversification of risk, the mitigation of local economic factors from trading in many different countries is a hugely important thing. If I was to advise anyone, as I was once in a small company exporting, make as many connections as you possibly can. gain market knowledge from people. Most of us meet each other so frequently and are willing to share information quite openly. So it's about those connections, but never forget that for all the challenges, export can bring an enormous amount to a business.
Fabulous. Devin.
Yes, I agree with Rob as well, that there are enormous benefits to international, and authors are wanted around the world. Their works are needed in every market, and so there's a demand, and the world is really flat. With social media, when a book is published in the US, we have consumers in Latin America, in Europe, in Asia that want to read that book, and sometimes in English. And so we need to be able to have give access to consumers to our product. So every company should be looking at their international business and investing in it.
Fair enough. Denis, would you like to have a go?
Oops. Yeah. My advice would be to localize the contents as much as you can and make them specific to the country you want to work with. So maybe select one or two key countries that you'd like to begin your export sales in, to really get a foothold in them. And the other one, well, it's for education basically, but you do have to right now add the digital side of it to the book side of it and to the print side of it, so that you have the hybrid educational tools. That works really well. That is what the teachers want to have, to be able to exploit qualities of the print which are specific, and qualities of digital with the video and the possibility to personalize exercises. But that's for if you're in education as we are. But I guess my fellow panelists are in. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And Joaquín, and for yourself.
For us, there are challenges in two ways, in three ways. We have been growing in all related to share our files with our subsidiaries for our key countries, so printing locally, okay? And the second part is to develop the e-commerce platforms in the whole countries and in every market, in order to bring our books to our customers. I think content has no limits. I think authors has no frontiers, and what we have to fight is to have a supply chain that allow us to make our content available all around the world and all around formats, in different formats.
Wonderful. And Rick, would you like to have the last word this morning for us in the States?
And first, let me say thank you, Ed, for moderating. This has been a fantastic panel, and to our panelists for all their contributions. Very interesting topic. So as I said before we joined the call, this is a very timely topic due to COVID. I think as being a part of HP, which is a $50 billion company and operating in roughly about 200 countries around the world, we have a bit of experience operating and doing business in all corners really of the globe. I think from our perspective, what our recommendation is to really understand your true costs and to look at all the different components around the supply chain. And that's something that as a business, we can help with as well, in understanding the total cost of a book and how to move it around the globe. So if you're interested in having an additional conversation, we're always welcoming the opportunity to connect and share some of our insights. And with that, I will go ahead and say thank you again. Thank you for joining to our attendees, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day, and happy holidays and end of the year for those who celebrate them.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.